Today, I will be talking about producer surplus, consumer surplus, and total surplus, and how all three of those factors can be changed when price increases or decreases, and how deadweight loss works. We can start off with the basic graph and just label our axes. So our y-axis is price, and our x-axis is the quantity. Now, I don't see the need to specify the specific prices and quantities so we can make a supply and demand curve on the same graph. Like this. This will be our supply, and this will be our demand. Let's call this price $8 right here, and this quantity down here, 5. Now, we can ... all the way to this point where they both meet, ... down. This means that the equilibrium price is 8 and the quantity at equilibrium will be 5. Now you're probably wondering how this relates to consumer and producer surplus, and I'm about to explain how. So if the price is set at 8, then people, like a person who's willing to pay for whatever this good is, up here, willing to pay, we can call that maybe $11, $10, $12, anything above 8, they are having a surplus because they're paying more than they're paying less than what they are willing to pay for. So there's a surplus here, surplus here, surplus here, but there's no surplus anywhere here because they are not willing to pay for whatever good this is at $8. They're maybe more willing to pay at $7.50, but not 8. So the area of this triangle right here, which I'll color in red, is the consumer surplus. And remember that consumer surplus relates to the demand curve, and producer surplus will then relate to the supply curve. Producer surplus is very similar to consumer surplus in that producers below $8 are willing to sell their good or produce it, sell it at a price lower than $8, but they get a surplus because they are selling it at $8 and therefore making a profit. So this area over here is the producer surplus. I'll write that there and color code that blue. Keep in mind that the way to calculate the consumer surplus and producer surplus and combine them for total surplus is to find the area of each triangle, which is 1/2 times the base times height. Now that we know how consumer surplus and producer surplus works at equilibrium, we could talk about what happens to them when the price shifts. We can find out what happens when the price increases by doing something very similar to what we just did before. So the price increased to 10, and now we can ... and ... So we can just say that this quantity is 4. Let's make that the example. Now that we have this all dotted out, we can see exactly what happens when the price increases. We see here that there are less people than before who are willing to pay at $10. So this would be the new consumer surplus. And then we can see, if we switch to a different color here, you can see that about this area will be the producer surplus. And we see also here that the market has stopped at 4. And this is because there are less people willing to buy and less producers willing to produce this product now that the price has increased. So now what we're resulted with is, in this triangle right here, a deadweight loss. And these are the people who are now out of the market. Therefore, the total surplus would decrease. And essentially, when it comes to producer and consumer surplus, the inverse would happen when the price decreases, in which the producer surplus area would decrease and the consumer surplus area would increase, but both would still result in a decrease in total surplus because it is not at equilibrium. And that covers everything I wanted to talk about. Just to review, I went over producer surplus, consumer surplus, exactly what happens to each of those whenever the price increases and decreases, and how that results in a total surplus decrease because of deadweight loss.